Hello. I chose to do my final project on Corbett's spectrum of environmental ideologies. So in this spectrum, the extremes are anthropocentrism and ecocentrism. In anthropocentrism, humans are superior to the rest of the natural world, and so it exists solely for human use. This is an instrumental valuation of the natural world where things have value for what they can do for humans. As compared with ecocentrism, the other end of the spectrum, humans are not separated from the natural world in that sort of way, and everything has intrinsic value, and nature is this functioning whole where everything kind of plays into each other. This whole concept of instrumental valuation versus intrinsic valuation is really relevant in kind of realizing this distinction between anthropocentrism and ecocentrism. And so I would recommend this paper by Baird Callicott called Explicit and Implicit Values, where he really dives into this idea of what instrumental valuation and intrinsic valuation actually are. Moving forward on the spectrum from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism, you first arrive at unrestrained instrumentalism, which is where the natural world exists solely for human use, and humans can kind of do whatever we want with these resources because they exist here to serve us. Next is conservationism, and here resources are still valued for human use, yet they should be dealt with more wisely, with a little more care. They should be conserved. Next, we come to preservationism. And here, resources have a little more value than pure instrumental value. They have scientific value, aesthetic value, and religious value. And so these things should be preserved because they are simply more than tools now. Next, we come to ethics and value-driven ideologies. This is where intrinsic value really manifests itself in this spectrum. And now we have humans having a moral obligation to whether it be land or plants or animals, because those things have value within themselves and not value simply because humans place value on it. And finally, we come to transformative ideologies. This is kind of a more intense version of the ethics and value-driven ideologies, except there's just more focus on extending rights to things with intrinsic value. And there is more focus on combating anthropocentrism and kind of creating a world that respects nature and can really coexist with it. The reason Corbett's spectrum is relevant and really worth talking about in the first place is because it allows one to not only better understand oneself, but it also allows one to better understand others. Because placing yourself on the spectrum, you have to be very honest with who you are and how you act. And if you can get a sense or get a feel of where someone falls on the spectrum, then when talking to them, you can avoid hashing out one specific issue, and you can get to addressing core beliefs, the core beliefs of that person, which will then allow for real change and more effective communication. Now, it might be a little confusing to kind of sift through this big old spectrum because some people may not have a fully formed set of environmental beliefs and an exact environmental ideology. So just for a really good example of someone who does have a fully formed ideology, Jason Kawall wrote a paper titled Reverence for Life as a Viable Environmental Ethic. And this is just a great example of someone who has a viewpoint about the environment and his place in it. And if you do actually read it and try and place him on the spectrum and think about where you think he would place himself. And also to get a comparison between a more ecocentric and anthropocentric viewpoint, you can read A Place for Cost-Benefit Analysis by David Schmidtz, where he's a little more on the anthropocentric side, and it just kind of gives a nice balance with Kawall's paper, so you can kind of compare the two. So in conclusion, you can take Corbett's spectrum and utilize it in everyday conversation and think about how your beliefs affect your actions and how another person's beliefs affects their actions. So thanks for watching.